Hi, I'm Will Potter. I'm a journalist, author, and senior fellow in the Center for Academic Innovation at the University of Michigan, where I help both students and faculty become better storytellers. In this video, I'll be discussing the importance of understanding your audience. Afterwards, be sure to check out the rest of the series, It's All Storytelling, to help you apply the techniques of powerful narratives in any discipline. So all that being said, in this age of BuzzFeed and listicles and everything online, I'm going to do the exact same thing. And here's what I would describe as not the 10 end-all be-all elements of storytelling, but what I think are some of the 10 most essential in this kind of a crash course that you can apply in any discipline and in any profession that you're going into. As a journalist, and here at the university when we're talking about telling stories in a publicly engaged way, I think it all has to start with your audience. Before you start writing a line, before you do one interview on camera, if you want to have an impact, you have to think about specifically who you're trying to communicate to. And the public is not an answer here. Or people who care about history is not an answer here. I want you to be really visual as much as you can. In a place like the Center for Academic Innovation, where we are right now, you have the resources to actually do research into this, right? For the people who do user experience design, you can create personas and avatars of who those individuals are and constantly refine that. But you have to have that as a starting point. And since we're in a university environment, I have to remind you all that all of this, it's not about you as the scholar or the researcher. It's not about you as the artist. It's all about the audience and whether your audience cares. And I think we have to internalize this with a good deal of humility as well. That no matter how much you know through your undergraduate and graduate and postdoc education, your responsibility is not to prove that to your audience. It's not to dump all of it onto them. You have to do a bit of curation, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. A good way of visualizing this in media is thinking about a publication like The Economist and someplace like Vice, right? They might be in many ways covering very similar or even the exact same topic, but I think we all intuitively can picture what the coverage would look at like in one of those publications versus Vice on HBO or an article or something like that, right? And that's because, especially in media outlets, you have to refine exactly who your audience is, because you want them to keep coming back, right? If you, as a journalist, pitch the Vice story to The Economist, it's not going to be a good fit. Right? The editors will know it's not a good fit, and it probably won't go anywhere from there. What I like to think about in this conversation around audience is with everything that's just demanding our attention constantly, right? All the devices we're tethered to, all the millions of hours of content that's at our fingertips. I'll tell you, I'm a sympathetic audience for any story that you want to tell. I like to think of myself as someone who reads widely. I like to engage in a lot of different topics. That being said, I have a family, I have a job, I have my own writing. And so if you are going to come to me with the story that you're telling, the bar is pretty high. And I think it's pretty high for all of us right now, right? We're getting kind of exhausted by how much information is at our disposal. And that's why we have to put even more attention on the stories that we're telling to make sure that it's cutting through some of this. And most importantly, it's showing the audience why this is worthy of their time and attention. How is it going to improve their lives, either through a better understanding of the world or concrete advice, or just a unique new way of thinking about something that's just interesting for the sake of knowledge. As part of that, you have to meet people not where you want them to be, especially as scholars. I don't care whether you think everyone in the world should care about molecular biology. Most people don't, or most people don't know about it. They don't have the level of knowledge that you do, right? And that's the same for any discipline that we could pick on in a case like that. That we can't project onto people that they're going to have that level of intensity and passion that has carried us through all of our professional careers. And I say that not to say that you have to, that makes it impossible to tell your story or to communicate with them. You just kind of have to recognize what that gap is so you can better bridge it. In my work, I like to think of identifying a base. So I write a lot about civil liberties issues and civil rights, human rights, And I have a pretty good idea of the people who have been following my work over the years and the type of publications I write for. So that's the base, right? These are the people that chances are you hit publish or you give that talk, they're already going to be there in the audience. But I think we all have to go a little bit further than that. So you do something quick for me. Everybody raise your hand as high as you can. Now just go 10% further. It's a little sneaky, right? Because it's not that you all were lying to me. What I told you with that first hand extension is that we naturally kind of impose limitations on ourselves. That we have, I like the 10% rule because you have that much left in the tank, right? If I were to say, well, identify your target base and then reach 75% further, you're getting into different territory. But I want to have you all think about, picture that friend, that ally, that colleague, and then just go, put in the effort, put in the muscle memory to reach a little bit further with your narrative. Finally, ethically speaking, when we're talking about nonfiction narratives, you have an unspoken and unwritten contract with your audience, right? And by that I mean, when someone is following your work, you have a responsibility to not deceive them, to not manipulate, to not take them down false turns. There's a lot of trust that is involved in any nonfiction narrative. That if you want someone to be fully engaged with what you're saying, they have to trust that you're not going to lead them too far astray. Another way of thinking about this is that really your role as storytellers is as a translator or a tour guide, right? That you're translating really complex information from your discipline or from your profession to a wider audience. And in a lot of ways, you're the guide with the flashlight, or you're on the tour bus going through the city streets, showing all the coolest stuff, showing all the stuff that if you were to leave London or New York or Ann Arbor, that you shouldn't have missed, right? And that's a good way of thinking about that tour guide approach. You're not giving them every nook and cranny around Paris, right? You're giving them the highlights, or you're giving them a specific narrative that's guiding all your stops along the way. Does that make sense?